You are listening to the Practicing People's Podcast. I'm CJ Hammond.
And I'm Jordan White. Together, we'll be taking a journey into the practices that help us align with our mind, body, and soul.
So take a deep breath, release, and remain curious as we explore new ways to enhance our lives.
Hello, everyone. Today's guest is Edward Korbal, aka Eddie, a practitioner and thought leader deeply committed to improving quality of life through organizational development, leadership, and the science of value. With an eclectic education and a breadth of professional experiences, Edward applies formal axiology and the hierarchy of value to help leaders and systems move from insight to impact. As a PhD candidate and a certified neuroaxiologist, he brings both academic rigor and practical wisdom to his work. We're excited to explore how value-driven perspective can influence and empower us to create greater value in our own lives and the lives of others. Eddie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me, CJ.
Absolutely. We are really joyed to have you here today. Obviously, a biography can only encapsulate so much. Within what was said of your illustrious career, is there anything that you would like to add to that because I know we've had a conversation prior to this, before we dig into anything else, is there anything that you might want to add to that intro that Jordan gave?
That's a polished statement, a polished paragraph, and it's a synthesis that probably comes across as a very linear life experience, and it's nothing like that. I'm a continuous process, and that is just a reflection of the experiences, the education that I've had to date, as well as a reflection of where I'm going. And I'll stop there.
Eddie, you are one that what I've realized in the two conversations we've had is you are in the most kind way possible, a less is more type of person, but you're very articulate in being to the point with your language. It is very deliberate, and I appreciate that much about you. So I guess my first question comes about your awareness to your language and how you're speaking about things. When did you start to arrive at this point of awareness in your life where you understood the knowledge that I have is the knowledge that I have, and there's so much more to grow into? When did this journey for you start into not the man that you are now, but again, on this journey that you've talked about, this what looks to be linear? When did you start to arrive at this point? Was it in your early years or later on in life?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, and I appreciate the compliments and pointing out a brief answer for me is the simplest beauty. And that's not to say that anybody that adds other color to their articulation or their story, it doesn't diminish it. My own preference is to receive other people in the most beautiful way they can, whether that's spoken word or unspoken, right? And the combination thereof. But to answer your question, I'll give an answer past, present, and future, and you're going to hear this repetitively from me. And that's very much influenced by, my research methodology and the work that I'm doing, as well as coming to the crossroads of understanding of who I am, how I show up in the world, and the way I think in the world, and the way I see the world, and other people doing the same. Right. So my influence very much started in my childhood. My mother was very religious, raised Roman Catholic, went through Catholic education. And I will say that the clarity that I had as a child, a young adult, came from that lens. And then as you start to go out on your own and you see the world beyond that lens from other people's perspective, you're like, oh my, not everybody's Roman Catholic. Not everybody had the privilege in so many respects, many variables, whether you're white. I was raised in a working class family. My parents worked very hard to give us things that they didn't have. And then you start to experience other people's perspectives and their world, and realizing they didn't have what you had, and others had more than what you had. Uh, and it's trying to make sense of that. And it's been this continuous process, introspection, doing your own work, trying to understand the complexities that show up in the world, especially in individual human beings. Um, and then the field of work that I'm in, you start to see things from this lens of systems, complex systems, organizations, small and large, uh, and that's more of my present perspective. And my future perspective is understanding that there's a lot to unpack still, and there always will be. And approaching that from a mystery standpoint, an awe standpoint, and that's a choice. And I'll stop there. So, yes, very much. And I will say, I'll add this to your question in my response, is that I've always been very, very introverted. And a lot of my personal work has been an effort to face that, and I'm going to say demon because I felt that it was a demon inside me, that I was very shy, wasn't able to talk, very easily embarrassed. I needed to refine that if I wanted to engage in the world in a better way, if that makes any sense. So very much um, an effort on my part to get more precise about my own experiences so that I could share them and articulate them in a way that resonated with others. And I'll stop there.
It's powerful, Eddie. Thank you for just opening up to to us and to the audience. And CJ led us through a little guided grounding before, and we were just talking about being authentic, and I just already feel it coming out, man. So thank you for going there with us, and resonate with a lot of what you talked about. Of course, on the introversion side, and just the complexity of today's world. So, if you don't mind, just telling us a little about how you found axiology. Like, what did that look like? And then talk to us as well about what you're studying now as you're going through your PhD process.
Yeah. So, how did I come across formal axiology, and how does that show up in the PhD work that I'm doing? And I'll answer the first part around formal axiology. That all started when I engaged in my first year of my doctoral program in organization development, and was introduced to Peter Demarest and Harvey Schuff's work, um, and took the assessment, their version of what we call the VQ profile, or I'm sorry, the HVP, so the Hartman Value Profile. And Harvey and Peter evolved that into a practice standpoint, right? So the Hartman Value Profile is very much embedded in um, Robert S. Hartman's work using transfinite mathematics. Uh, and Peter and Harvey and others have evolved that assessment, that measures the way we perceive value in the world, basically. And I was hooked, so much that in the early stages of our doctoral program, they were asking us, what are you interested in? What might you do your research on, dissertation work, et cetera. And I took a deep dive into formal axiology. The institute, the Robert S. Hartman Institute, read at the time, I think it was, all their journals, from end to end, trying to make sense of this new world to me. Um, and it very much, going back to my childhood, being raised Roman Catholic, I'm like, okay, so from a morality standpoint, that lens was very much driven by religion. And here is this, uh, and it sounds somewhat like it's intuitive. Do we need a science that teaches us how we value and see human beings, how we value and see extrinsic things, like I'll say a diamond ring, or value how other people think, right? And we talk, from a formal axiological standpoint, Hartman, in a very simplistic way, explains those value perspectives, the hierarchy of values: intrinsic, think people; extrinsic, think things; and systemic, think thinking, right? Um, and he came up with a beautiful assessment that gave us insights into how we perceive value in all those dimensions. So that's how I came about it. As I took a deeper dive to answer the second part of your question, Jordan, um, I realized that the more I was learning, the more I realized I didn't know, and more I didn't understand. Very humbling, um, and realizing I needed to, and I have a penchant for being just, I like to be in the thinking space. I'm very systemic. And I have continue to engage in understanding and learning about formal axiology to this date, to the point where I'm on the Hartman Institute, the Robert S. Hartman Institute board, um, and contributing, as much as I can in the capacities that I'm able to. So yeah, to wrap it up, I mean, I was very much, introduced to formal axiology when I started my doctoral studies, took a deeper dive, and have now, uh, I'm, I'm I'm realizing that my religious upbringing and Catholicism has very much, um, primed me to be open to this formal axiology and the hierarchy of value, as that there's a science that's embedded in natural law, and that's my interpretation, of my understanding of where I am in understanding formal axiology. So yeah, it is an ongoing journey, and you can't unsee once you see and understand the elements of the science. You just can't unsee it. So my now and everything that comes in my future is framed through that lens, unless something else upends it. So
When you speak of, you know, the your standpoint now, there is a construction of a point of view now, and that you said there was religion that was at the base of it. Were there any deconstructions that happened while the construction was happening?
deconstruction, that is a beautiful, that is, you want to talk about precision in language, CJ. Uh, Wow, there's a lot to we could dive into there. And yes, it's a deconstruction of, it's an unlearning. It is because you're current paradigm or your current understanding of the way you see yourself in the world now becomes, when I was introduced to this science of value, it's like, oh, it completely upends your moral compass because you're understanding that, okay, wait, if this is a science, then what do you need religion for? So all these questions start to surface about existential questions, very deep questions, at least from my perspective. It's like, well, yeah, I was reminded of the song by John Lennon, Imagine, right? It's just like, imagine a world with no religion, right? And et cetera, and on and on and on and on. It upended my paradigm, and wow, it puts you out on a precipice where you have to, well, I shouldn't say you have to, you try to resolve that uneasy feeling, that existential angst, if you will, and how do you live in process? And I didn't have that language when I was faced with that. I didn't have that language. It's almost despair, right? It's like, oh, dang, like, wait a minute, this isn't. I don't have all the answers. Not that I thought that I did, but I thought I had enough clarity about the formality of life based on that perspective. Like, and it completely throws you for a loop. And I'll tell you what, it is not easy, right? I don't want to come across and say that, here I am now. I'm having a conversation with CJ and Jordan and Andrew. Um, no, it's not easy. The ebbs and the flows, right? The valleys, right? The highs of when you start to use and I'll use formal axiology as a lens, is that you're like, wow, you look at the news differently. I look at my wife differently. I look at my children differently. Um, yeah, all I get, well, you left me speechless almost with that question.
Well, it's no, I sort of led you somewhere because you placed me in a position where I wrote down something from my meditation this morning. At the end of it, there was something that reminded me of this because axiology, in a way, brings us to a state of mindfulness. And I'll read the quote so you guys can expand upon this. It said, mindfulness doesn't remove our difficulties. Rather, it brings us closer to them to see them more clearly and accurately, which ultimately allows us to find peace. And it resonated with me as you said that because those difficulties, through a lens of fear and lacking in curiosity, leave those to be unexamined and therefore that much more difficult because it's like coming up to the diving board and saying, I'm not going to take the jump versus examining and perhaps seeing, oh, water is there to allow me to what normally would be a jump if I hit flat ground. I will be, cradled into a position where I can survive this and take this leap. So that mindfulness, that the practice of meditation that Jordan led me into really has allowed me to not overcome difficulties in a way where I don't face them, but face them, examine them, and then figure things out or examine them and realize I can lessen my fear. So it reminded me of that. So I wasn't it was a leading question a bit, but it reminded me much of that quote today.
Yeah, you're giving me goosebumps with that quote, because well, you shared with me that the beauty of my brevity is reflected right back in that quote of what you just shared. Um, and at the end, what is that peace, is arriving at a state of peace, even though you're intentionally being challenged about your current worldview and self view, and the courage to dive off that diving board, right? And I think there's a in our world that is hyper connected through social media, AI, et cetera, technology, is that life is in process. It is not the end result of what you're seeing, okay, is a mask. It's often just it's a mask, and there's nothing pejorative about that or judgmental. Is that in a way we want to see that silver bullet, whether that's reflected in doing a TikTok and you're seeing a refined, polished result of someone spending 4 or 5 hours giving off a 30-second, 60-second recipe that came out perfect, right? I don't know. Versus not understanding and seeing behind that mask, someone spent 4 hours being able to produce that. And much the same way we're doing this podcast. Yeah, we're gonna edit it. It's a yeah, we're experimenting here, and at the same time, we're going back and we're refining it. And that's the way I feel about where I am in my stage in my life.
I wish more people would appreciate the rehearsal versus the performative. The thing that you speak of, especially in the line of work I am in now, like the to your point, the hours that go into rehearsal versus the finite, very short function that is the performative. And again, I think that to your point, it's pretty crazy that we go out into the world where this is our rehearsal time to interact with people. My conversation with Jordan isn't performative at all. It's a sort of rehearsal, and we're kind of playing and manipulating things and seeing what works and what doesn't. And I guess the rehearsal comes out. I mean, the performance comes out now, but this is still when it's at its best. Your rehearsal comes so naturally and so fluid. That's why you do it so often, that it comes out as authentically as possible. That's what acting is. Acting at its worst, you can tell someone's acting. Play the emotion of sad. That's not sad. That's a performative version of sad. I want to see. I would enjoy more so seeing the real thing. That's why when me and Jordan talked before, it's not about being vulnerable necessarily. I would rather you just call it authenticity. Jordan, give me your authenticity. Eddie, give me your authenticity. Vulnerability can allow for that, absolutely. But authenticity, I believe, is the most powerful version of vulnerability. And I'm curious, Jordan, I know I've been chatting my butt off here, what you'd expand upon in that.
Yeah, I mean, I was taken aback by the quote as well. I think just looking through the lens of formal axiology, just the power of it too. And Eddie, and I've worked with a few people who um, have grown up in a Catholic home, right, and where that systemic lens is pretty strong, right? Like there's a very clear right and wrong way to be, right, and that can be a lot to, like you said, process, right? And like we are all works in process. There's never an arrival point. There's never a place where you're just, I made it, right? It's more so we have these life experiences, and those shape how we think, right? So this assessment, this science, it helps show that to us, and it's so powerful when people do. To your point, Eddie, have enough curiosity, have enough willingness to engage and looking at their thinking as objectively as possible. And then making the choice to start reconstructing, to use some of CJ's language there, through the lens that we know is going to create more value in the world. Because regardless of religion, I mean, that's pretty much the takeaway of most of them, right? Is to be the best version of yourself and contribute to the world in a way that uplifts it, right? Like to love thy neighbor. There's plenty of quotes, right? There's plenty of different where directions you could go. But yeah, I guess that quote, CJ, is powerful, man, and I appreciate you bringing that into the conversation. And Eddie, I think it brings another layer of power to your work, especially blending formal axiology into organizational development. Like what if organizations were actually taking the time to understand their different thinking perspectives and make the conscious effort to reframe them or remodel them. That's the technology that we are trained in, to remodel your thinking to create more value, not only for yourself but for other people. So it's like, wow, what would the world maybe look like at that point?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just me doing the work. CJ's doing the work. Jordan, you're doing the work, and others.
Yes.
Creating the conditions and the space, right? You've created the conditions, just like CJ grounding us with that meditation, set the stage intentionally and created the conditions for us to have dialogue in a safe place to explore life, and our ability to share our perspective in a truthful way, right? That's that authenticity.
I'm curious, as we talk about, because we expand on such esoteric ideas, and now you're trying to work with a corporation to sort of bring value to, and we talked about this earlier, bring value to a corporation that's driven more so by profit, but trying to respect the person that is driving the product. What is your process when dealing with a company and trying to help bridge the gap between, we want profits, but we also want to appreciate our people? We're looking for cohesion between these two. Eddie, what are some practices, or how can we start to achieve this goal? How does Eddie bring about bringing a company into the valuegenic lens that really helps to not only better the company through a profitability standpoint, but my more so important standpoint is through making sure that the people that are working for the corporation are truly being valued? How does Eddie go about that practice?
It's a good thing I got a good night's sleep for answering your questions, Jordan and CJ. Um, that's a, you know, that's the challenge, right? So you talked about, yeah, we're talking about some esoteric things, very philosophical, existential, but how does that show up in the real world? This is the Practicing People's podcast. So what does this look like in reality? Yeah. Well, number one, it's doing the work myself. Uh, Entering into any system, and not to speak esoterically, but anytime we engage in any organization, and I use that very broadly, whether that's a family system or a group that you're trying to help work on a project or an organization, but how do we navigate that? And I'm going to reverse the hierarchy of value. And this is my mindset. This is my approach. It isn't the only way. Number one, working on myself. So my self leadership. What am I doing to prepare myself from an education standpoint, an experience standpoint, to be able to enter into a system and create greater value rather than more harm? So the intention is for me to, dang it, I better have a robust background, okay? Not only from an education standpoint, but from an experience standpoint to enter into a system. And we'll assume that we're talking about a much like a larger organization, you know, 5,000, 10,000 employees, um, for example. But the principles apply regardless of whether it's two people or, you know, a couple 100,000 employees. It doesn't matter. Or even a government, or even a country. Um, and when I say I'm going to reverse the hierarchy of values, that I enter in systemically thinking, okay, asking a lot of questions, And one of those questions is, well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of your organization? What are you trying to achieve? Um, and they might use the language of, well, our mission and our vision is this. No, what's the purpose? Okay. Using language that is relevant to them. So for me, it's adjusting and meeting them where they are. Not talking about hey, I'm going to come in and talk about systemic value, extrinsic value, intrinsic. No, no, no. Number one, the relationship, building trust. And that is asking good questions, clarifying questions around purpose. What are they trying to create, achieve? What value are they trying to create through their purpose? Um, and do they have, we talk about attributes in axiogenics, that could be interchangeable, that language. What kind of knowledge, skills, abilities, competencies do we need to be able to achieve that purpose and create value? And that is the systemic. So I'll ask a lot of questions. And then extrinsically, I'll ask questions around, well, what are your results? What are you achieving? Are you okay with what you have achieved? Um, so it's very under the radar, if you will, when it comes to applying formal axiology in the space of OD. Um, if they're curious enough and open enough and are willing to challenge the current status quo of their system, whatever that is, methodologies, et cetera, strategy, they'll be curious enough and open enough to answer those questions. And naturally, through the course of that dialogue, the intrinsic, the extrinsic, and the systemic all are entangled, right? There's no neat compartmentalization of, oh, we're going to talk about people, and then we're going to talk about your work, and then we're going to talk about your innovation. It all gets commingled.
If I
I
could
don't
just
know if that answers your question.
No, it's I just hope everybody could pause right here and go back the last 3 minutes of what Eddie said and realize that's applicable to the personal experience of everybody, which is really what axiology is. It's everything that you talked about is how you go from start to finish of that. And I was just thinking as you were talking about if I had a rocket and I said you were like, well, what's your intention or what's your purpose? To go to the moon. And then you said, well, what attributes does your rocket have? It's tall, it's a cylinder, it has a cone on top so it can cut through space. Well, do you have the rocket boosters? Oh, no. That's an attribute that you have to add. And again, this is like many humans that have goals or destinations that they're looking to ascend to. Do I have the attributes? And that's a difficult question in that checklist. And Jordan's brought me to that point many times, asking me again, and it has nothing to do with the external. So much of this has to do with the internal, and it will always bleed outward. That's why I was appreciating when I said, how do you change a company? You said, well, I got to work on myself first, or work with myself, not on, work with myself first. And Jordan, many times I bring this to my now fiance, Paula. I love her dearly. When I would have an issue, I would take to Jordan and try to almost vent and look for a answer outwardly. He would ask quite often, well, what does that have to do with you? What are you doing, CJ? And I would find myself in this pretzel of anger because I'm like, Jordan, you're not hearing me. You can't listen to me. And I feel like you probably run into that with companies. It's like, you know, we need more of this. Well, let's take a step back. What about this? And I'm pointing to myself, audience. And Jordan would always point it back to me. And that mirror was not as satisfactory as my finger pointing outward with the laser looking to take anybody else out.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. And you know, and Jordan has a beautiful way of asking that question because I've experienced I've had conversations with him, and he just has a real gentle spirit. I'll just put it that way. And I think that's indicative of how do you change an organization is, yeah, you go in with a non-judgmental spirit and possibilities, and ask the question, well, what does good look like for you? Is it good enough now? Okay. And if it's not, go and take in a deeper dive around, okay, well, do you have the attributes and the people you need to make that rocket? Do you have the financial resources, the materials to fulfill the attributes required to fulfill that purpose? And then from a thinking standpoint, are you working and engaging the collective wisdom that exists in your current system at all levels, right? Are you asking the janitor if he has any ideas about how to do that, right? So it's that equity, it's that wisdom that is untapped in organizations very heterogeneously. Are you creating the space for people to share their gifts, their talents, their attributes in their fullest capacity? Whether that's the janitor or the rocket scientist. And that covers the whole spectrum. Back, this comes full circle to your question, CJ, is are you engaging the thinking, the work, right, the extrinsic, and the people in an organization to its fullest capacity to realize all the attributes required to fulfill the purpose of what you're trying to achieve? That's it.
Yeah, profoundly simple. and
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 that's right. So complex, you were dealing with complex systems, but at the end of the day, it's not complicated.
yeah, you beat me to it, Eddie. That's where the complexity comes back into the conversation, because I'd imagine you've experienced this as well. It's like, okay, well, here's my purpose, and then people bring in their own viewpoint on the right way to achieve that purpose, right? Like, right. So it's one of the exercises we use even in the self leadership program. All right, let's set right and wrong aside for a little bit, right? Just for this conversation, what is it we're looking to accomplish? What's the most efficient way? What's the way that's gonna uh, make you happy and make your team that's working on it happy? What's gonna help you feel purposeful? Like, this is a way different line of questioning. And to kind of bring up what you talked about, Eddie, it opens up new possibilities. When we're so focused on right and wrong, which we get trapped in systemic ways of thinking constantly, it limits us so much as far as what we can accomplish, and finding the balance of the hierarchy of values. What I think I hear you saying, it's not that, okay, we use systemic thinking for this and then extrinsic for this and then intrinsic for this. It's we've got to take the time to think critically about how those three things can connect. Is that a fair way to yeah,
I
like,
couldn't say it any better. That the dimensions of value, when we're referring to intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic, are entangled in a way that they show up in the process of being, doing, and thinking. That's the freedom to live. Robert S. Hartman's book, Freedom to Live. It's the freedom to be. It's the freedom to do. It's the freedom to think. And the test against that is, how does that align with the hierarchy of value when we make those choices? And does it violate the intrinsic, extrinsic, or systemic aspects of the hierarchy of value, dimension of value? That's the simplicity of it. It's a decision making framework that is so beautiful and can be applied in very, very complex dynamics, whether that's a small or large organization, a government. Yeah.
And, you just said, like, to be, to do, to think. And again, all this sounds very simple. I just think that sometimes things are so simple that they're not understood at the level of complexity that is necessary for something so simple, because it's the be, the do, the think, the show up, the become, all start from self, selflessness, sort of, but self. And this stage of society, Eddie, we talked about this on our first call, where the state of society, and we can bleed it down to companies and everything too, but so much of it looks to the external for answers. And they're, funny enough, both of you, I'm realizing, we're assessing answers without any curiosity towards the issue, not the problem. We can deem it as a right or wrong, which is wrong would be a problem, but we're not looking at the issue. So an issue has no issue, is just a thing, but we're not looking at it through the lens of curiosity and openness. Rather, answer is this. I have in this day and age, with the way politics are, and politics has become more wrapped up in people, but we're not necessarily assuming to take the time of what value are we adding by asserting our answer. I would love if someone could explain the value that they're adding by this, but I'm thinking, when you guys talk about this, we're not really assessing what that process looks like through the lens of intrinsic first, because we're always seeing others as separate versus the wholeness of this conversation, then the bleed out of our community, then our city, our world, like that kind of thing. And it just became very apparent to me as you guys were both going back and forth talking about these systems. You're both very heavily imploring, please search inwardly first, because it will absolutely bleed to your outward.
And that's the root cause, TJ. Uh, The We're not perfect human beings, okay? Um, and our intention or inattention to being more in process of improving ourselves has a cost. And what we have to ask ourselves, and this is very much through um, being mentored and coached by Peter Demarest, Harvey Schuff, Jordan in our mastermind calls, and other coaches, and refining the work we do by continuously asking ourselves, what's the cost of me not doing the necessary work, okay, given the attributes that I've been given, whether that's by God, right, right, and shortchanging those capacities. What's the cost? What's the cost to my children? What's the cost to my wife? What's the cost to my family? What's the cost to my workplace? What's the cost to my community? What's the cost of me sitting in Congress or in Senate and not having the courage to stand up and ask, what does this policy do to a child that is not going to have coverage or food on the table? Or what is this policy going to cost in human life if I send arms to Ukraine? It's the root cause. So local, I have this saying, and others have said this, it's not just me, is that local is global. Local, if we want to apply the hierarchy of value to ourselves, well, yeah, local is global, meaning if I'm not working on myself, I am negatively impacting my children. I'm negatively impacting my wife and my family and yada, 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 my church community, etc. Now, we're human beings and we have limits. And this is where grace comes into play, mercy, kindness, empathy, compassion for ourselves and others. That's like, and I sound like I'm probably just proselytizing. I'm up on the pulpit, and at the same time realizing my own flaws. And it's rinse and repeat, and having the ability to forgive yourself so that you can wake up and be more.
Hey,
It's beautiful,
oh,
Eddie.
George,
Yeah.
forgive me. There's one quick add-on because you're a language master. You said it twice now, and I think that perhaps you'll agree with me. You keep saying working on myself, which places yourself outside of yourself to almost be the Frankenstein, like working on the person. And I continue to, I'm like, is it working with or working on? Because you guys appear to be working with yourselves every day. That's the one thing I've noticed because I don't feel as if you're Jordan or you are ever at battle with yourself other than looking to support yourself. And just from the lens of this is hearing you say that working on is working on the guy, working with is this sort of buildup with inside, which is what you both have taught me during this time. So I just I want to bring attention to your words because you made me realize something. I'm less working on myself. I'm more working with myself. What the building blocks I have and sort of tetrising that inside.
That is a nuance that you're making me pause here and realize, like, well, when I work with a client, I'm going to use this example. When I work with someone that I'm coaching, am I working on them or am I working with them? And does that apply to me? Yes. Well, I'm going to say, heck yeah, yeah. Am I working with myself? I love that. I love that nuance.
Yeah.
All from you guys, I promise you that.
Well, it's powerful, CJ, because a lot of back to the introversion thing, Eddie. I don't know if you resonate with this, but there was times in my leadership journey where I was trying to work on myself, be more, outgoing and uh, I don't know, expressive, right? And like those are things, sure, you can work on, but like a lot of the self leadership journey is back to what you're talking about, CJ, is that we're all born with these unique attributes of who we are. We're all one of one. You've heard me say that a million times, right? So, how do we go within, get more uh, acquainted, and get to know that deeper, yeah, like spiritual side to ourselves, if you will, or yeah, just the more inward parts of ourselves. So we start working with ourselves instead of right the kind of going outside is what you're implying is like, well, the answer's out there somewhere. I got to go get this thing. I got to go. It's like, well, maybe,
Maybe it's
or
closer. Yeah, maybe it's a lot closer than that. And Eddie, you brought up God, and I people sort of shun from this, but my experience with God became that much closer when I realized I was placing God externally versus internally, and I am that I am is one of the most simplistic words ever said, and it to me God lives within, and to be casting out and looking outwardly to some other God other than that which gave me the breath of life internally has sort of transformed the way I've gone about seizing the day, realizing that there's nothing that's without me that isn't within me already. And again, this journey that you both have helped me to uncover is in the words that you just said now about trying to decipher what's an issue, what's right, what's wrong. That's far less in my day now. And what are my difficulties and what I can bring mindfulness to find ultimately, to circle back to that peace that we're adhering to. And there's so much in your language, Eddie, that I, I look to add to my repertoire because again, you and Jordan, you guys have this beautiful way of abridging to make longer. You're shortening to get length out of it, if that makes sense. It's this weird paradox that doesn't necessarily juxtaposition that doesn't make sense unless it's understood through the extrinsic value of or you guys know what I'm saying. I'm struggling to put this part in, but you get what I'm saying. You're shortening to lengthen.
Yeah, yeah, and that's well. Thank you for the compliment. and the and this is part of true storytelling, quantum storytelling, is yes, less is more. Um, Indigenous ways of knowing, we call IWAC. Indigenous ways of knowing, Native Americans would use very brief, if you ever listen to them speak, when they're teaching lessons or carrying stories to the next generation, it is short, brief, and that allows the person listening to interpret it and explore it on their own.
Damn.
That's the curiosity.
Mm.
The wisdom's embedded in that, but it's for the receiver to explore that. And that's what we're doing. We're all, as human beings, we're exploring the process. And that's a choice in the way that we look at it from that perspective.
Wow, man. Thank you for that, Eddie. That's powerful. And I guess as we start to, I think a part two conversation around quantum storytelling and digging way into that, man. We can get into that one for sure. And would
That's
love to
Dr.
hear your.
David Bogie and Grace Ann Roseel's work. That's Dr. Grace Ann Roseal. That is not me. That is not me. It just took me a long time to unpack that. But
Sure, sure. Well, uh, yeah, I'm just wondering, Eddie. I mean, we've had this conversation today, and um, I'm thinking about, CJ and I, we talk a lot about being men of value, right? And this is a kind of on the spot question, so if you need to think about it for a second, please do. But I'm wondering for you, like, how would you define a man of value, and what if there were more men of value, kind of in our government, in our communities, in our systems, to use the word that we've been going back to today. What do you envision?
but you gave me chills when you asked that question. Uh, so, and I want to stay consistent with the theme of this conversation. And at the same time, you're challenging my, as an introvert, I was trying to figure out what would be my closing thoughts. Uh,
No pressure.
and in the process of our conversation, as soon as all three of you jumped on, you're all wearing hats. And I couldn't help but use the hierarchy of value as a lens to look at the hats. And this is my answer to how would I define a man of value? How would I define myself? And I'm going to use the hats as my response. And I'm going to use the systemic. When we talk about the hierarchy of value, the systemic, I'm going to use CJ's hat, and it's the silver lining. It says silver lining. So, as a man of value, see the silver lining in ourselves and in others. And think about ways in which you can create value rather than destroy value through your thinking, and find the silver lining. So, optimism, hope, that is very systemic. And then extrinsically, Andrew was wearing a Nike hat. This is extrinsic. As a man, take those good thoughts about the silver lining, your optimism, and your hope, and take action to create extrinsic value in the world. And that, at the end of the day, a man of value, I'm going to use Jordan's hat. It says, be a good person. And I would say, put all three of those together. And those are my final thoughts.
Who is this guy? Wow, Eddie.
Oh my
Eddie.
God.
Eddie, masterful answer right there in literally taking the present moment and working with it. I'm very less often am I short on words, but that was really cool, man. That was really cool.
Thank you.
Beautiful, man.
Thank you for all wearing hats today.
Wow. Wow. Eddie, we before we let you go, I know those were mic dropping words, but if there was anything that you would like to impart with our audience, and also please inform our audience on ways that they can reach out to you and gain some of this knowledge that you have ascribed to us today or work with you, please let us know both of those. So any last words if you have any, or how can they reach out to you or get in contact with you?
Yeah, being an introvert, it's very hard to promote myself as well as market myself and advertise my offerings, but I will take you up on that. And I will take you up on that because if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if there's nobody there to hear it? Well, yeah, I want people to hear this, right? So, and it's not like it's Jordan's work, CJ, it's your work, it's Andrew's work, and others. Uh, so, from a freelance standpoint, if anybody is interested in coaching, doing any type of team development, organization development, change management, etc., I do some freelancing um, through my company called Cycle of Experience. And that could be, you can reach me at on the website, um, www.cycleofx.com. And you can reach me on LinkedIn. Just look me up. Happy to connect with anybody that is curious and wants to explore possibilities of being more, whether that be in your own life, in your work life, in your community life, period.
Man, love it. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for joining us today. Similar to CJ, man, like that blew me away. Just kind of breaking down the systemic, extrinsic, intrinsic at the end there, and this has been a beautiful conversation, and we just appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to staying connected and supporting your work and just who you are. And then we really are grateful. So thank you for joining us today, and you're welcome back anytime, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate creating this platform and this space and bringing your own value as men into this world so that we can see the work necessary that is non-linear about being more. So thank you. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Practicing Peoples podcast. We hope you found our conversation inspiring and thought-provoking. We appreciate your support and passion for personal growth and self-improvement.
To help build the Practicing Peoples community, please follow us on Instagram at Practicing Peoples Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and engaging discussions. Liking and sharing our posts will spread the word about the podcast to others who can benefit from these conversations. You can also reach out to us at our website, www.practicingpeoples.com, for more materials and ways to tap into the community.
Leaving a rating and review on your preferred podcast platform is a valuable way to support us and help potential listeners discover our show.
Remember, personal growth is a journey we embark on together. Let's build a community where we uplift and inspire one another to achieve our true potential.
Thank you for being part of the Practicing Peoples podcast family. And until next time, keep practicing and keep growing.